Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins Trubergy, also known as Baron Sidious. I find myself in the unenviable position right now of being perturbed by and wanting to say that noted journalist Glenn Greenwald is acting like a fucking pillock. Now, a big part of the reason I say this, actually the main reason I say this, is that over the course of the last month and a half, roughly, he has spent a great deal of time on his system update program, knocking on about how he is disturbed and disgusted by the recent push by a lot of folks in the conservative and politically homeless environment, calling for the employment blacklisting and the cancellation of pro-Palestinian activists and Hamas supporters and people who are in the ideological left or progressive movement. He snidely points out that many of the people who are now calling for these cancellations are the same exact folks who made lucrative careers out of pointing out that cancel culture is nonsense and that it has no business being employed across our culture and our cultural zeitgeist. And he kind of points out, hey, these folks made lots of money and gathered gigantic audiences, pounding their fists about free expression, yet now when it comes to the subject or topic of Israel and their war against Hamas and in Palestinian territories, that suddenly they turn pro-censorship. What Glenn seems to either willingly, which I suspect strongly, or inadvertently overlooks, are the literal scores of smaller creators and voices on places like BitChute and Rumble and Substack, a platform which Glenn himself greatly benefited from when he had to find safe harbor, when he had to leave The Intercept, an outlet that he himself was foundational in establishing. When he decided to go independent, he went to Substack and found himself the heavy beneficiary of going independent on their platform. But as soon as it became more lucrative for him to go to locals/Rumble, he jumped ship about as fast as any other bilge rat. I find it strange and just a wee bit hypocritical that he talks about how people, made lucrative careers out of holding a particular position when he did the same thing, jumping from The Intercept to Substack to go independent. And then the moment something even more financially lucrative for him personally came along, he left Substack in his vapor trail to go to locals/Rumble. Look in a mirror, Glenn. He also seems to ignore, like I said, either willingly, which I suspect is very possibly the explanation, or inadvertently, which is also possible because, let's face it, folks who are as notable as Glenn Greenwald and other professional, high-profile journalists such as himself and Matt Taibbi and others, amongst their sort of reporters and journalists, they wouldn't deign to bother looking to truly small-scale or independent voices who don't already have audiences of clamoring hundreds of thousands or millions. But if you are below the line of notice for public people like this, they don't want to bother with giving you the time of day or the notoriety. There are plenty of people who are saying, you know what, we are not turning tail on the notion of free expression. But because so many folks on the conservative side or on the slightly right of center or true centrists have, for over a decade now, been forced to live under the auspices of cancel culture, and even when we have cried out against it, been told, oh, well, your arguing against it is just proof of your istophobism, to paraphrase Dan Bongino. The whole Kafka trap of you claim that you are not, and that therefore is evidence that you are X, Y, and Z. And we've been told for a decade and a little more change that if you apologize for X, Y, or Z, that's just an admission of guilt that you did X, Y, or Z, and your apology is never enough. It's not, quote, it's not cancel culture, it's consequence culture. There are dozens, scores of voices on Substack and BitChute and elsewhere saying, you know what, you people on the left have demanded for over a decade that we live by these standards. Fine, fuck you. Let's see how you like them when they're applied right back at you like a boomerang. We warned you. People like myself as well, who try to be as middle of the road as possible, even as a libertarian. People like myself have been saying for years, hey, don't keep pushing people toward that ledge. Because once they fall off that ledge, you're never going to argue them back to supporting you. At best, if they survive the fall and they climb back up that cliff, when they get back atop it and they see that now your weapons can be wielded against you, they're going to do it with a blood-streaked smile. And they're going to say, now you get to feel the very fire that you have wielded against us for so fucking long. And Glenn Greenwald completely ignores this. Completely ignores it. Because he's a self-righteous pillock. Once, I think it was last week, or maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, he pointed out during the course of one of these recent episodes of his System Update show that, if someone had pointed out that that was their perspective, that he could at least see his way to maybe giving them the benefit of the doubt and saying, okay, well, at least you're being consistent. But he has only mentioned this in brief passing once in over a month and a half, that those people who are a much larger cohort than he is willing, it seems, to admit or capable of recognizing, that they're out there screaming at the top of their lungs saying, hey, what happened here? We warned you not to keep pushing this nonsense, that it was going to boomerang back on you. He refuses to admit that they're there and that they are in sizable numbers. Why? Why does he refuse to do that? I should think the answer is obvious. It garners him a much more active audience, a lot more clicks, a lot more silent bobbing heads of ditto-headed agreement if he just claims, well, these people are being hypocrites now. All of them must be hypocrites. No, Glenn. No. There's a good-sized contingent of them who have just decided, you know what? I've had enough of being told that I must live by these rules, because every time I warn you that you're not going to like them when they're applied back at you, you didn't listen to me. You didn't listen to us. We tried to warn you, we tried to raise and wave as many red flags as we possibly could, and in every instance, we were laughed at, we were jeered, and we were told to shut up and go away. And we went away. And now we're back. And we're wielding that cudgel right back at people who have, for far too long, demanded that their expectations be applied across the board. There is no purity test that everybody will consistently and forevermore manage to pass. Ideological purity tests are stupid, self-defeating nonsense for this exact kind of reason. Because eventually, the boomerang effect happens. It is inevitable. We have seen this time and again. These people will eat their own. And they've begun to, in small numbers and in small batches here and there, they've begun to devour their own. And folks on the more conservative or middle of the road perspective, they've decided to say, you know what? No more. Have a dose of your own medicine. And Glenn Greenwald seems completely incapable of seeing that that's the situation. Because admitting that that is actually at least a third of the situation would not bode well for his ratings. Far more glamorous to grandstand and say, oh, you people are being hypocrites now. You pounded your fist in the name of free speech and free expression, but the moment you had the opportunity to wield it on your ideological opponents, you chose to do so. Here's a question for you, Glenn. Can you blame them? Honestly, can you blame them? We've seen this before. Conservatives throughout the 80s and 90s, people who claimed or self-applied the label as members of the, quote, moral majority, who tried to tell every member of the LGBTQ plus whatever elemental P alphabet community to get back in the closet, to keep their personal business personal and just to shut it. For years, they tried to wield the cancellation weapon against people on the left who are more liberal, who are more open-minded and progressive thinking. And it was wrong then, just as it's wrong now. So, in a way, conservatives, guess what? You've got your own kind, your own people to point the finger at as well. This thing it's not a boomerang. I used the wrong term there throughout this exposition so far. It's a pendulum. And folks on the socio-political right, they swung it back in the 80s and 90s. But they didn't try to get people removed from banking. They didn't try to get scores of their ideological opponents fired from their jobs or blacklisted from future employment. No. When it came to doing those things, progressives and liberals were the first to wield those particular tools out of the weapon chest. And now that they're being wielded back against them, they cry foul. They cry, help, help, I'm being repressed. Tough shit. You brought this on yourselves. You thought it could never happen. You thought if you just pushed hard enough against the Milo Yiannopoulos and the Alex Joneses of the world, that everybody else on the conservative or the middle of the road areas would be too terrified to rise up and use those weapons and those tools back against you. Surprise, surprise, they're not scared anymore. Because they have gone through the hard work of finding alternatives, of finding ways to survive, even when they get debanked, even when they get fired, even when they get blacklisted. They have discovered ways of surviving. In a way, some of them should thank you for opening their eyes to the possibility that there is a way to survive outside of the cultural zeitgeist that has become dominated by the socio-political left, the progressives, the liberals. These folks who are conservatives or who are middle of the road, they've discovered options to continue a gainful existence outside of those systems that have been weaponized against them. It's difficult, yes, but they have proven the resilience and shown the work ethic to be willing to do it, to put in the effort and to survive without you, and to stand against you. In a way, in a weird way, they owe a great deal of thanks to you for that. But don't expect them to actually thank you for it, because they were already okay being in a shared system with you. But you insisted over and over again that they didn't deserve to share that space with you. And now they have their own space. And now we have two systems competing against each other. One system that wants to see things brought back to an even keel, where people can be treated based upon the merit of their character and their work ethic. And another system that wants to measure everybody based upon immutable characteristics and how badly they've been oppressed historically. One of these systems values effort, hard work, ingenuity, and the ability to think outside of the box. The other system demands ideological purity, marching in lockstep, and doing only what has already been proven to work before. One system is versatile and can grow and adapt to change. The other has shown no ability to do such and will actively destroy anybody who tries to. Which system do you think is going to survive? I've already made my pick. Cheers.